Missing someone. Missing someone. Missing someone. With all your heart.
Hey, what's up, everyone? Welcome to the Whisky Influencer. I'm Tim, and this is your first episode of Whiskey Week in Review, where we take a look at the whiskey news from the last week, and then we take a peek around at the whiskey content creator world and see what has been going on there. If you like what you see, subscribe, comment, like below. So first, we'll get kicked off with a little bit of whiskey news, starting with the lawsuit with the Scotch Whisky Association and the Waldhorn Distillery in Germany. So the Waldhorn Distillery in Germany has been sued by the Scotch Whisky Association, and this is actually 9 years ago. The lawsuit has finally been settled. Basically, anytime a distillery outside of Scotland uses a Scotch whisky terminology or Scotch whisky terms in their branding of their products, the SWA takes notice and they request or demand the distillery take down that branding. In this case, it was Waldhorn Distillery's Glenmorangie whiskey. Using the term Glen implies that it is a Scotch whiskey, at least in the eyes of the SWA. Whether that's true or not, well, I don't know. It seems probably unlikely, but the SWA is sensitive to that. They don't want to mislead the customers and have them think that the whiskey is actually from Scotland when it's not, and trying to capitalize on the quality and the reputation of Scotch whiskey, which may actually seem a bit hypocritical of the SWA. SWA sets standards for what can be considered a Scotch malt whiskey, or Scotch whiskey in general. And one of those standards or exceptions is that you can add food coloring to the whiskey and mislead the customer in thinking that it is darker than it actually is, which may imply age, which may imply cask activation and that kind of stuff. So SWA is a little hypocritical, and they are forcing the Waldhorn Distillery to rebrand the Glenmorangie Distillery. And this is not all that different from the SWA demanding the Virginia Distillery Company a few years ago from not using the word Highland in their branding. Next on the news list is the new release by the Campbeltown Distillery Springbank. In this case, you can take a look at Springbank's Instagram page to see the new release. It's called the Campbeltown Block, and this will be a blended Scotch whiskey, a blended malt whiskey, that is, combining Glengyle, Glen Scotia, and Springbank whiskeys together in this special release called the Campbeltown Lock. This isn't the first time they've done that. They had a Campbeltown Lock 21-year-old years ago, and this is the latest edition of that. And like anything with Springbank, this is likely to sell out in seconds, or even before it's officially released. It's going to be tricky to get a bottle of this whiskey, but rest assured there are alternatives out there. Most specifically, the independent bottler Douglas Lang has a whiskey called the Gauldrons, which is the exact same concept, a blend of Campbeltown malts. So if you can't find this one, check out the Gauldrons. They've already got several batches out there, and they have been sitting on the shelves collecting dust. I actually picked up one myself a few weeks ago down in Queens. So if you can't get this one, go get that one. Now let's take a peek at what is going around in the whiskey content creator world. First, we'll take a look at my own Instagram account, the Whisky Influencer, where I interviewed Paul from No Bad Whisky. Now you can take a look at the link below to check out the full video where Paul and I share 3 different whiskeys, the Port Charlotte 10, Ardbeg Corey Vrecken, and the Old Forester 1920 Prohibition Edition. And you'll get our impressions of those 3 whiskeys. But most importantly, it's my weekly episode of Get to Know the Influencer Better with 16 questions. So you get to know Paul a little bit better and what he does for his career. Check out the link below and let me know what you think. And Beyond my own account, let's take a look at my 5 favorite whiskey reviews of the week, starting with the Whiskey Wash's review of the Glenmorangie, A Tale of Winter. Now, Glenmorangie is one of the most experimental distilleries out there. They always are pushing the boundaries of different types of cask maturations, different forms of yeast, and they always come out with something that's at least good, if not great. In this case, we're looking at a 13-year-old single malt Scotch whiskey finished in Marsala casks from Sicily. Looks very intriguing, a whiskey that I may be interested in trying at some point, but you can take a look here and look at the link below to see what the Whiskey Wash's impression of that whiskey is. Next on my list is a review of the Glengoyne 10-year-old by the Scotch Test Dummies. Now, the Scotch Test Dummies, some of my favorite YouTube reviewers out there, and Bart and Scott are trying out this entry-level whiskey by Glengoyne. Glengoyne is a whiskey that is very approachable to beginners. It was one of the first whiskeys I started to explore, and the 10-year-old is their first entry into their core range. It's a very approachable and delicious whiskey, one that's great at the start of a flight. And we can take a look at Scott and Bart's review here to see if they, how much they like it. You can take a look at the link below and just watch their full review. Number 3 on my list is the Port Charlotte 10-year-old reviewed by Ralfy. You can take a look at Ralphy's thoughts about this one here. To me, the Port Charlotte 10-year-old is one of the best entry-level Islay whiskeys there are. It's bottled at 50%, 10 years old, uses an interesting cask maturation, including some red wine influence, and it is a good value at $60 to $70. But take a look to see if Ralfy likes it. Check out the link below. Next on my list is the review of the Weller Special Reserve by Bill from the Whiskey Dictionary. Now, Bill starts this video off with a very interesting comparison and says that the Weller Special Reserve tastes like a very interesting blend in his blender. You could take a look here, and he discusses whether this is worth about $24. And obviously, you'll never find this whiskey for $24. It is sold at secondary market prices because of the reputation for Weller. He talks about whether it's even worth the measly $24 that it is retailed at, or should be retailed at. Take a look at his review here and let us know what you think. And then finally, the last review on my list is the Ardbeg Fermutation. Now, the Ardbeg Fermutation is reviewed by Erik right here, and he discusses whether this special release by Ardbeg is worth the whopping $200 price tag. Now, personally, I don't really buy Ardbeg special releases because of the high cost of them, and I can't imagine the whiskey delivering that. But if you're a big Ardbeg fan, check it out. Check out Erik's review here. He'll tell you whether he thinks it's worth $200. Anyway, that is the first episode of the Whiskey Weekend Review for February 20th. If you liked it, comment, subscribe, like below. Give me all the feedback you can, and I will continue to improve this show. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you next week.